Welcome back. My guest today is multi-layered. Let's just put it this way. Studied psychology, is a tech geek. He is a neuroscientist the modern way. You know, neuroscientists were with 500,000 followers on Instagram, but so deeply thoughtful about a topic that, of course, I'm very passionate about, mental health and well-being, in a very, very unusual way. TJ Power is what I just said, someone who's trying to spread well-being through the dark world of social media, as well as the use of technology and gamification. But more interestingly, he teaches it in a way that I think all of us need to learn, much more simplified, though not shallow, approach to neuroscience. A conversation that was introduced to me by my dear friend, Susie Flory, who was a guest on this podcast in season 1, who introduced us. And now finally, 3 months later, we are together to share with you something that I really think you will enjoy. Neuroscience, the modern technological way. TJ Power. Thank you so much for being here. Wonderful to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I love what you do. I really and honestly think that the mix between, a scientist, you should be grumpy and old and, not fun, but you seem to be teaching neuroscience or sharing neuroscience and mental well-being really, really successfully to the masses on Instagram, mainly 500,000 people or so. How did that start? Why would you do that? And why is it working, do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting first question. I think how did it start for me was I was actually someone that had a period in my life that was quite tough for my mind to deal with. I, between the ages of like 16 and 21, lost 5 people in my family in 5 years. And many people in our world go through loss. And for a young brain, I was like, wow, this is a new thing to try and cope with. And during that period of time, I went heavily into kind of the partying, dopamine-y addiction world. And during that time, I was also studying psychology. At the age of about 21, 22, I started thinking like, wow, I'm not feeling that good in my head with this kind of lifestyle. And went on kind of like a 3 months retreat. I knew my grandpa who lived out in nature and went to stay at his house for 3 months to try and like kind of sort myself out. And during this 3 months, I basically experimented with all the different behaviors that we'll probably chat through today and got myself feeling pretty good. And then was kind of looking at my friends and family and like wider people online and thinking, wow, a lot of people are feeling these things, feeling like flat, low in drive, worried, whatever it might be. And I started thinking, this worked for me. I'm going to start making videos about it, and started sharing the videos. They started to connect for people kind of in that COVID time, in the end of COVID. And kind of went from there.
You studied psychology, but you're very much into technology. You founded Neurify, which is about gamification of well-being and mental health. I want to cover that deeply. And your upcoming book is The D.O.S.E effect.
Yeah.
That's when, in August?
That is in January 2025.
January 2025, yeah.
Month where people struggle a little bit with how they're feeling.
I know, yeah.
And hopefully it's going to be a good game plan for how to take on that period.
And basically that's about, the hormones that affect our bodies and how we can, use that.
For sure.
Why, and when we were chatting before the, starting to film, you were saying, yeah, it's a bit of a complex mind in there, all at age 26. How is it that you combine all of these? Like, where does the passion come from?
Yeah, I think I grew up as someone that definitely just loved technology. I thought technology was so cool. I remember being like, I think I was about 10 years old when the iPhone came out. And I thought, wow, that looks cool.
What?
Something around
I
there.
was so old when it came out. Man.
And I remember getting an iPhone and just like, I loved that world. I thought social media was really cool. Like I wasn't averse to any of these things at all. And I also got super fascinated by psychology. I played pretty high level golf as a kid and I wanted to be a professional golfer. That was kind of my original pursuit. And when you do high level golf, you get psychological training quite early in life because golf is so stressful when you hit a bad shot. And I became interested in tech. Then I got really interested in psychology. And then the kind of philosophy on psychology, on how I believe humans could get themselves feeling really healthy and good in their minds, came later in my life during that period when I was kind of rediscovering what it means to get healthy.
First of all, on golf, just so that we agree, I now realize why I hate it so much. So
It's
honestly,
so stressful.
it really is, and in an engineer's way. To me, you know, as an engineer, if you do the same exact action, you're supposed to get the same exact result. No, that's not true with golf. So yeah, I think on the third session, I was like, this is not. This doesn't follow the scientific method.
It doesn't. Maybe if a robot was playing it, if he did the same swing, it would work.
Yeah, and somehow in my mind I was like, there is really no clear path to getting better at this in my mind. So I'm not going to do that. A lot of what you discuss is that there are those 4 hormones, those D.O.S.E, that govern all of our well-being. Do you want to take us through that very quickly?
Yeah, so you got D.O.S.E, which is dopamine, super famous one. And then you have oxytocin, which connects humans, serotonin, all about our mood and energy system, and then endorphins, which is very connected to kind of de-stressing and relaxing the mind. And effectively, the whole premise of the dose effect is that our brain didn't develop those chemicals in the last 100 years. It developed them over the last kind of 400,000 years as humans were evolving. And for 99% of that evolution, the main things we needed to do were be able to hunt and connect with one another, find new places to live and survive that really hard experience. And those chemicals are designed to thrive in that environment. And when you, or if you could, like transport our ancestors into this world, and suddenly they'd go from waking up every morning to bright sunlight and hunting and building and doing a lot of like effortful action. If suddenly they started waking up and sitting on phones and not talking to each other and having a sugary bowl of cereal, they wouldn't feel good. Very quickly, their brain would send them a message and say, no, this doesn't feel good. This isn't good for our survival. And with this dose theory, I basically am suggesting that our brain is sending us all a very clever message, suggesting that this current path we're on as humanity is not going to be good for our survival in the long term if we continue to engage with too much of this unhealthy behavior. So therefore, these chemicals are very sophisticated machines that are saying, guys, don't do this, don't do that. And then it reinforces positive stuff, do this, do that. And the more you understand these hormones and align to them, the better you feel.
I need to clarify what you just said there. Do you think that this pandemic of stress and depression and, sadly suicide and so on are actually collective signals that say this is, that says to humanity at large, this is the wrong path? I never thought of it this way.
I really do believe that. I think at the core of like the human being or any species, survival is the goal. Like that's the reason it is here, is to survive and procreate itself and continue going forward. And when you look at the different behaviors we do, some give you this kind of like guilt, shameful feeling within. Like if you spend 2 hours on your phone or you watch like pornography or you eat really sugary food, there's like this feeling that arises in your body of like, this isn't valuable to me. And the opposite occurs if you go for like a 30-minute walk outside in nature. You get this reinforcing feeling. And I think our brain is so sophisticated at knowing our future and knowing what's going to be advantageous. And like the perfect comparison there is, if you were to watch porn or have sex, both achieve a similar outcome for your body, but one leaves you not feeling good and one leaves you feeling great. And the only difference is one of them is not going to be valuable to human survival. If anything, it's going to reduce procreation, and the other one is a value to survival. And I think on all the different behaviors we engage in, I think our brain is very clever at telling us which are of value to the future of our civilization.
And so accordingly, when we are, when even though we could be getting the same hormone maybe and the same biological response to something, somehow if it's not pro our survival, our bodies, our psyche will not feel good about it.
With something like the variation, how the hormone would actually be stimulated, it would be on the speed in which the hormone increases. The hormones are not supposed to increase super quickly. Like if you took an example of, I'm a hunter-gatherer, I'm out there, I need to provide food for the family. And I wake up in the morning and that's my goal. And I go out for 3 or 4 hours in the pursuit of trying to find some kind of food, foraging for fruit or finding an animal or whatever it might be. The rewarding chemical that's driving you to do that is dopamine. And dopamine is going to go through this kind of slow curve as you gradually get closer to that food. Then you'll experience a rewarding experience and then it will slowly calm back down. If you take something like entering TikTok, your brain is suddenly experiencing more dopamine than it would get even if it was successfully hunting an animal, and it gets it within like 5 seconds. And then because the brain is always seeking for homeostasis, for balance, it's like, how the hell did I get up here so quick? So then it crashes us and our dopamine goes below its baseline level. And when we're in this kind of apathetic, demotivated, low mood kind of headspace, that is our dopamine level crashing. And that's where so many of us are today. Like, we wake up, we have sugary food, we scroll social media. And I think for so much of society, we then are in this low state, and then we start thinking about our life and our job and our relationships, and we think all of our problems are there. Whereas I really believe a significant proportion is just our brain is chemically imbalanced, and then it's causing worrisome thoughts.
That is an incredible way of looking at it. I have to admit, I've never thought of it this way, and it makes so much sense. Before we dig deeper, can I ask you to explain very quickly the D.O.S.E? So what each of them is and how it is supposed to function in the body for our listeners who are not aware of them?
Definitely. So dopamine, controlling all of your motivation, and it will rise when you do anything that's effortful. The most simple example of dopamine is we all have the annoying task in our life of having to change and wash our bedding, and it's not a particularly fun task, but eventually after you've taken that duvet off and you've washed it and dried it and put it back on and done all the annoying buttons, you get into a clean bed and you suddenly are like, oh, I'm so happy I did that. You never get into a clean bed and regret that effort, and that's your brain rewarding effort that's going to be of value to you. So anything in your life that's effort, it's going to build it. Oxytocin then connects humanity together. So whether you're in a good conversation, making eye contact, contributing to someone, physically connecting with someone, being grateful to someone, all of that is going to stimulate oxytocin. Serotonin is then interesting. A brilliant scientist called Appleton really created this whole framework that 90% of the serotonin is made in the gut, which is now really widely known. And any time in which you do something that's going to support the health of your body, whether that's nutritious food, sleep, sunlight, time in nature, even the whole kind of calm breathing practices that we have, that's going to stimulate serotonin and raise our mood and our energy levels. And then endorphins, really interestingly, is actually just designed to help us cope with physical and psychological stress. If you were in a situation where you had to actually fight an animal or run away from an animal, we needed a mechanism that in that moment of extreme physical exertion, a mechanism that would kind of take all the stressful thoughts out of our brain and take pain out of our body. Like if right now I said to you, run a mile down the road as fast as you can, you'd probably get out the door and be like, oh, I've got a stitch, I can't be bothered. But if a bear was chasing you up these stairs, you'd probably be able to run. And endorphins release into our brain, they take all our stress out of our thinking. And that's very valuable, obviously. Like, we're not getting chased by bears now, but if you are stressed, it's very good to release the endorphins.
And what would trigger the release is the activity itself. So if you're feeling rewarded, you get dopamine. If you're subjected to stress, you get endorphins, or the other way around?
It would be if you've experienced stress from anything, relationship, work, phone, whatever it may be. Endorphins will release if you physically exert yourself. So the base one is, of course, exercise, but even something like stretching your body, even singing songs quite loudly, you get an endorphin release. So it feels quite good to sing. If you go into a hot environment like a sauna, if you laugh like really hard, so anything that gets the body like physically active is going to release them.
Your personal story is that, your release, if you want, at a point in time was through sort of those addictions, like, porn or alcohol and so on and so forth. And then somehow you find the path to say, no, hold on, this is actually not working well for me. I can find that through other activities. Why would you figure that out and others are not? I mean, there are so many people in the world that are stuck in that, replacing a human relationship and real sex with porn, or replacing, calm and a good, connection with alcohol. Why are we stuck in those addictions?
Firstly, they are very powerful, these substances. It's very hard for humans to manage that amount of pleasure. Like if you put mice or rats in any kind of dopamine behavior, like a rat, for example, if it has access to cocaine, will choose the cocaine over food and water until it's dead. It won't touch the food and water. And our brain operates very similarly. Like, it's very powerful, these substances. So I have no kind of judgment to society for the fact we've got ourselves into this situation. In terms of how I made the shift, I love feeling good. And I always found that during the exam periods at university, I'd have like 6 weeks where I did a very healthy lifestyle, and I'd be working every day extremely hard, like 8 to 10 hours a day of revision and writing and all that kind of stuff. And although I always perceived those periods as like, oh, these are going to be stressful and stuff, I actually found I felt really good when I was in a much more disciplined lifestyle. I felt my happiness level was more consistent. And I started pondering throughout that final kind of exam period at university, do I want to feel good for kind of like 10% of my day, or do I want to feel good for the majority of my day? And that started then setting a framework of like, if I keep engaging with all this quick dopamine stuff, like I have a short period in the evening where I feel great, but for the majority of the day I feel low and I feel worried in my head. And I started testing it out, just like, can I engage with more behaviors that lead to me feeling happier for the majority of the time? And I just way preferred that experience. And I think for much of society, we're also hooked on this dopamine that we just haven't spent enough time away from it to actually know what it feels like to feel really good.
That's such a good point.
And I think a lot of people, I think mental health is interesting because there is this percentage of society, say 5 to 10%, that are really in a state of clinical anxiety and depression. And like, we need to do all we can to help alleviate that pain and move people out of it. But there is also a percentage of society that are all kind of like 4 to 6 out of 10 in how happy they feel. Like, they don't feel really bad, but they also just are not feeling really good. And I think if those sort of individuals experience just like a week of discipline and think like, wow, this actually feels awesome, it then begins to motivate the change. But you've got to like touch it to be able to know how good it is.
I think that's really, really, really core. I mean, in a very interesting way, in my work, I recognize that a lot of people don't even recognize what it's like to be calm, what it's like to be, unstressed, or what it's like to have a pain-free body, or what it's like to be actually joyful. We've replaced those either with addictions, like you rightly said, or with acceptance, which I think is a very scary place to be, because I'm to blame as much as anyone else. Like, my physical stress is normally very high most of the time because of the amount of travel and activities and engagements that I go through. And my body's aging, and my body's not really as, capable as it used to be when I was 26. And it is definitely something that I, for a long time, sort of hyper normalized. I was like, yeah, it's fine. It is what it is, and it's just part of trying to make a difference or to be successful in life and so on. And I find that to be quite scary, really, because it's becoming almost the norm that we're killing ourselves.
It is, and we are becoming kind of too tolerant, I think, of that feeling. And as I said at the start, like, we're all individually being sent this message, this feeling within us that we're engaging with some behaviors that are definitely not of value to our lives. And if we just learn to tolerate that feeling, we're never going to change how people live and the experience of life people have. And we all get this period of time on Earth, and it's like, it'd be so nice if a vast majority of that time was spent enjoying it and not hating it. And especially like when you lose people and you think, oh, that person didn't get to experience life and I am getting to experience life. And then it's like, oh, I really should try and make the most of this experience and have a good time doing it. And it's not to say like bad times aren't going to come. You're going to have stress with work and family and kids, all that kind of stuff. But there are definitely changes we can make that could shift the percentage of time we spend in kind of a happier state. So
spot on. Absolutely. Gamification of mental well-being, or of well-being in general, I have to admit, intrigued me a lot. So when I was researching your work, what you're trying to do with Neurify is I'll let you explain it better, but basically you're trying to say that there are certain habits, there are certain activities or practices that would activate the dose balance, if you want, the dose effect. And that those don't necessarily have to be kickstarted through your typical approach to life. You can gamify the approach to, you can play a game or a challenge, go through a challenge, and then that will, create a habit that will, balance your dopamine, for example. Mm-hmm. I have to say this is very intriguing. It's all because I'm a video gamer, and
me too.
and I can easily say that real gamers, by the way, not addictive gamers, real gamers, there is so much meditation, there is so much focus, there is so much dopamine, of course, clearly, right?
Yeah, but, not all unhealthy though, by any means.
Exactly,
some
right?
can be great when you're gaming.
Yeah, and I really find it almost difficult to explain to people that as a gamer, I'm not what you see at all. It's not like there are aliens on the screen and we're slicing each other. That's not the experience at all. It's a very, very embodied, very present, very flow kind of experience, where it really, if they replaced the aliens with ducks, it would be the same, and if they replaced the the movements of my guns and bullets to just a crosshair on the screen and red dots, I'll it's the same flow experience. So I am a huge believer that you can actually create massive mental states and practices through gamification of things. Well-being, though, that's a tricky one. So tell me first, how would that look like? What would the experience look like, and why do you think it would work?
Yeah, I think on that gaming topic, for example, the key difference in gaming, just for context, is those games you're describing that you engage with probably require effort to experience joy. So the curve is slow on the dopamine rise. Whereas if you compare the game maybe you're thinking of in your mind to like Candy Crush, where it's just colors, that kind of thing would crash you out. So
that's very true,
gaming is very varied in terms of how it impacts the brain. In terms of the gamification of it, I think to an extent, I think the human life experience is a game of, like, even if you look at the hunter
Let's not go there.
Well, I mean, we even all have like a app on our phone that we log into, and it has a number, and it's like a point score, and that's our bank balance. Like, we are kind of we're kind of playing a game already. And the reason I found the gamification so valuable is we train like quite a variety of ages, all the way down to kind of like 10 years old up to kind of adults in their 50s and 60s and stuff like that. And when we started doing these sessions, I started the approach of, between each of the sessions, we do 4, 1 on each chemical. Between the sessions, setting them really specific challenges to complete in groups before the next session begins. And I found that as soon as someone had some kind of challenge to complete, they were more likely to engage with the behavior. And it was like a very, very specific challenge around cold showers, or like a certain amount of minutes in flow state, or whatever it might be, a discipline-based challenge. And we are living in kind of a addiction world, and whilst I think that's creating much of the challenge we have for our brain, I think there's also much to learn about, like, wow, how do you get humans to engage with stuff? And it's very clear that because of how addictive sugar is in cereal, we'll eat loads of cereal, or how addictive pornography is, or how addictive social media is. And that is all coming from the perspective of dopamine hits in the brain. And I've kind of had to try and think down the lens of, like, how do we get people to experience dopamine hits off healthy behavior? Not just from engaging with the behavior itself, but from the feeling of completion of a challenge. And therefore, if with this process, like, we have 5 key behaviors within each chemical, these 20 core behaviors across dose that people are trying to integrate into their life, if they feel like they're kind of winning a challenge, it then increases the dopamine. And I believe the most important thing for society is we get everyone into a naturally high dopamine state, because if you're someone that's in a high natural dopamine state, you're the opposite of, like, apathetic. You're, like, really action oriented. And in order to survive, like, a world where there's sugar everywhere and porn everywhere and all this different stuff, you need to be someone that is very motivated and very disciplined. Like, I just think that's an integral skill for all of humanity to develop in the world that we're living in. We'll have virtual reality coming, and we've got AI that we've got to try and manage, and being someone that's, like, good at taking action is key. So if not only do we get them to engage with the healthy behaviors that boost all the chemicals, but because of the gamification, they feel like they're getting this rewarding, I'm going to the next level, and we have it done in levels as they go through. If they feel like they're going through the next level like a game, they're getting dopamine off that, and healthy dopamine, because it's like an actual effortful challenge to complete. The higher the dopamine we get in society naturally, the better we're going to all feel.
But then in that case, what you're trying to do is you're sort of almost replacing the dependence of that person from a negative or a harmful addiction, and replacing it with the addiction of the game in a way. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think to an extent, like, in this world we're in now, we're all going to be addicted to something. I think
it's like, let's just accept it, and then we might as well just be addicted to the good things. Yeah.
I think that, like, that almost is the case. Like, you might be addicted to your work, you might be addicted to some of the unhealthy stuff, whatever it might be, but if we can get those addictions, like, predominantly to be healthy addictions, like, life is going to be a lot better. And, like, for me personally, like, I was someone that was really hooked on partying. Like, I can't quite do it justice when I talk about on these podcasts about the kind of lifestyle I lived, but it was far from the lifestyle I live now. Yeah. And the only way out for me was spending a lot of time like thinking like, what else could I get like a big dopamine hit from? And the reason that like Neurofy looks how it looks and D.O.S.E is making the progress it is because it is my new addiction effectively. And someone could find an addiction in the creation of a work idea, but you also could get pretty hooked on like a really detailed artistic drawing, for example. Like I had a young girl come up to me recently in a school, and she was about 13 years old, and she was struggling quite severely with ADHD. And ADHD, for context, from a neuroscientist perspective, is low dopamine levels. And humans have known this for a long time. Although the medications that treat ADHD, things like Adderall and Ritalin, they're dopamine-based pills.
Are they? Yeah.
Yeah, and someone with ADHD, you could genetically be born with low dopamine levels and therefore have this like predisposition to anything addictive is going to be super tempting because you're going to get bigger spikes off it. But it also means that if you engage with a healthy behavior, you also have the capacity to get this bigger spike. And this girl was talking to me. I said to her, like, what do you really like doing? What gets you into flow state? Because I teach these kids about flow state. And she was saying how much she likes digital art on her iPad. And I said, like, in this next 7 days before you come back for the next session, just make that your 100% focus. Is like really developing the digital art. And because she had that as her focus, she was then doing something that was effortful to build dopamine instead of just scrolling TikTok, which to a young person, they don't see any difference. They're like, it's an iPad, it's the same thing. But one of them is creating effort in her brain. And she came back the next week in a much more energetic, excited, motivated mood because her brain had engaged a load of effort. So dopamine had risen. I think it's just so important that people begin to see the distinction.
Can I ask you, why are we trying to treat ADHD at all? Why is ADHD a problem?
That's an interesting question. I think part of that is because it doesn't fit particularly well with the school and education experience, like being someone that's hyper, like kind of excited by things. And the reason you're hyper excited by things is because like if something does excite you, it really excites you because you experience these big elevations in dopamine. But what I think is interesting, because I've done a lot on ADHD, we've built this whole new model on ADHD, which we're working on, that I've been teaching at schools. And if you took a hunter-gatherer that had ADHD, as we call it, this low level of dopamine in their brain, they would grow up, and by the age of, say, like 10 years old, they're beginning to have to contribute to that tribe, and they would go out there and they might hunt for food, forage for food, be good at building the shelter. But what would be interesting is the individual with ADHD would experience the greatest levels of increased dopamine when they engage with the behaviors. They would feel the best of these behaviors and actually probably become the best at them. So I actually reckon back in the day, those with ADHD would have been the highest performing individuals. And in our modern world, I think it's now becoming the opposite because they're trying to fit into being good at lots and lots of things. Whereas an ADHD individual needs to find one thing and get really, really good at it.
So exactly my point, to be honest. I mean, in a very interesting way, I think neurodiversity in general is being positioned as something that needs to be treated because it is a question of fit within the capitalist society, right? If we didn't need to put kids in school, and instead we allowed them to find out what they're passionate about, digital art, for example, and then tell them to go ahead and just focus on that and make that their entire life, they'll be amazing at it.
Amazing,
right?
The best of the best.
And you take any neurodiversity, like any kind, even an autistic child, for example, will have maybe low social skills but very high talent, talents in other areas, and so on and so forth. And I think the trick here is that we're trying to mold everyone. So that somehow we become all, the probably lowest denominator of all of us. It's like, something that fits all of us. It's uniform for all of us, and that's easy to cast through education systems and universities, and then, interviewing skills and basically to get them to take uniform jobs, all of them exactly the same. And it sort of gets to me a little because we cause so much panic to a parent and go like, your child is, diagnosed with ADHD and you should be concerned.
A woman in my team at Neurofy is experiencing that exact thing at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the exact opposite should be the case. It's like, jump up and down in joy because your son is diagnosed with ADHD. Just find out what they're really good at, what excites them, and they'll be amazing at it. You know what I mean?
I do, and I think one of my challenges with this is there's this thing called the DSM in psychology, which categorizes all of the different challenges society experiences. And it's like the Bible of psychological difficulty. And when you take something like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, my biggest pain with it is the fact we've put this word disorder on the end of all of these things. And I had OCD as a young kid, like quite severely OCD, and my mum was fantastic at helping me like navigate it and learn to live with it and stuff like that. But one of the ways in which she did that is she just didn't let me hear these words that I have a disorder, like as a young kid, because then I would have kind of through a self-fulfilling prophecy gone down like a wrong path with it. And with this model we teach with ADHD, we've actually renamed it to ADHA, where it's attention deficit hyperactivity ability, and get kids to actually think of this as like, wow, I have some kind of superpower rather than some kind of disorder. And I think when you look at that hunter-gatherer idea, and I always come back to this just because that's what humans did for the majority of our time here. Having a tribe of 70 people where everyone had a really valuable, unique skill would create a thriving tribe, because someone's really good with the bows and someone's really good. And then I think as society scaled up and started living in these massive groups and stuff, it became clear from the kind of top of the system to be like, right, let's make sure everyone is the same, because it's going to be easier to manage.
Exactly.
And I think
it's like let's put them in the mold. If they don't fit in the mold, just push the mold a little harder, give them a pill, and just
effectively.
Yeah.
This is where I think it's interesting with the technological world we're heading towards, because that mold was built so that at mass scale everyone would go through school and then go into corporate kind of systems and work within those organizations, and like the kind of peak of that being law and finance and things like this. But if AI has this capacity to kind of really automate a lot of this stuff, like I was with some of my brother's financial friends who are very successful financial people the other day, and I was showing them what they could be doing with AI and how much it could be saving their time in their work. And they were completely blown away at how much of their job is done, could be done by AI. And these people are kind of the top of society as we currently perceive it. But what I do wonder there is that if a lot of the automated kind of corporate life gets taken by AI, does that then mean we might walk into a world where more individual kind of artistic skills may become more required? Could we walk down a path where more individualization is good?
I definitely think this is where we're going to. I think we're going to end up back in the cave years. Right.
Interesting.
Not in the caves. We would, but imagine a world of abundance where most of the work is done by machines. Hopefully, where society realizes we don't need to compete on a capitalist gain anymore. At the end of it, basically, we may just suddenly realize that sitting on your desk all day was never the life purpose of anyone. Like we were supposed to be out in nature, sitting around the campfire, chatting and getting to know each other and doing physical activities and connecting with nature. And, this actually is the original design of humanity. And we went through that transition in the middle where we created money and we created jobs and we created this and that and the other. And so instead of going out hunting in the morning, you have to go out and do accounting in the morning, right? Which is
I'd rather do that too.
Absolutely, which is really not not really what we're made for at all. And yes, there will be resistance and pain to go back to that original design. But in reality, if everything happened in abundance, you might as well, imagine if I had you for the next 6 hours and we had the most incredible chat about understanding neuroscience and everything else, and there was no pressure to go through, all of the transport network and having to make money and all of that stuff. It's possible. It's possible. But would it happen? I don't know. I think that even if it ends up being our next reality, it would go through a lot of teething problems and a lot of pain on the way, because we're so used to this now.
I think as we make that kind of more merge with tech as a species, I think probably the most important thing we could possibly do is make sure the human instinctive part of us is very well satisfied effectively.
100%.
Because if we just become these like digital humans, coming back to the beginning, like that message is going to get really loud in our heads of like the body is not going to enjoy that experience. I even heard you say on a podcast the other day that you think well-being should basically become society's number one priority. And
I think we're going to hit you know more than I that this uncertainty around what's about to happen is a very big reason for a lot of mental health issues, right? Humans, we don't like that. We don't like change. We just like our life shitty as it is. Let me keep swiping. Just let me keep. I know how to do it. This is good for me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the resistance at a capitalist society level, at a believe it or not, at a governance level, at an individual level, it's just going to be very fast. It's almost like when you say about dopamine hits that are so quick.
Okay.
I think we're getting into a stage where there is so much happening, and I have to admit openly, TJ, that you're so much smarter than I am. It's the truth, because of lots of things, but you're made with a processor that is fit for this a lot more than my processor. Right?
Interesting.
And I, maybe I still have a sort of like a bit of code in the background that you may not have acquired yet. You'll acquire over the next few years.
I hope so.
Yeah, but the truth is that from an interface to this world, even though I spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours trying to keep up with what's happening on AI, I'm absolutely certain you would crush me if we were to compete on, using AI to create something, right?
Okay.
It's so integral to the way that you are, but in a very, very interesting way. My wish is that this does not become the direction we go to. Even though I tell everyone you have to learn the tools. But believe it or not, like you just said, I think we should somehow use this opportunity not to merge with the tools, but to merge back with our humanity.
Oh, yeah. That would be
the right way to go. I mean, there is a need to merge with the tools now because we think that this is the way to advance in the coming world. But it will be so short-lived that we are needed next to the tools. Very, very quickly, the tool will not need you at all.
Yeah, we almost need to strengthen the uniqueness of being human.
Absolutely.
So then both can live together. Whereas if we try and become a robot, we're just not going to be as good at
100%. Yeah, and basically it will almost completely prioritize our differences. Think about that, because you and I, as humans, are so different, even though so similar in some ways, because we're not attached to something that's 10x our intelligence.
Agreed.
Right? So if you and I would analyze a problem from two very different aspects, if we both add our 10% to the 10x, then it becomes irrelevant in terms of differentiating us. We all become like the machine.
Far too similar.
Yeah, it makes us far too similar. That's the truth.
Interesting. And coming back to that conversation of celebrating the uniqueness of each individual, we need the uniqueness.
We need to go the
thrive.
opposite way. Would you be okay to share a few of those disorders, allegedly disorders, and what would be, so if you were to talk to several mothers in school and say your child has OCD, it's not a D. Right, your child has ADHD. It's not a D, right? Because the ADHD child, first of all, is very creative, is very impatient, is very passionate, is very good at one thing. See those values in your child. Okay, if you take some of those Ds that would come to your mind and tell a mother, this is actually useful if you apply it in the following way, what would you say? OCD, for example. What is OCD good for?
I really believe that all of these quote-unquote disorders are effectively overdone survival mechanisms. Like I think within our brain, with OCD, for example, it's of great value to be hyper-organized and disciplined and litigious with how you organize your life. However, it can go too far for sure, and you can end up washing your hands 20 times a day, which then would become quite a challenging experience. I think step one is your kid not believing they have a disorder. I started developing this at a super young age. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I started having that kind of, you have obsessions with things. Like I had to for example, I'd be in my bedroom. I'd have a thought in my head that I had to go into the garage, which is outside in the middle of the night, and turn a light switch 5 times. Otherwise, this event would happen. Parents would die or something. That would be and I was 5 years old. It's such a young brain to even be able to compute this stuff. But to my brain, obviously, effectively what happens with OCD is you engage with the behavior once, you go and turn the light switch off, the outcome that you were seeking to not happen doesn't happen, and then it gets reinforced and you're like, yes. Hey, it worked. So then you get into a difficult path with it. And
wow,
the first kind of step my mum took, because my mum also identified with these things, and she took me to what I believe was called brain training and never told me I had this OCD thing, and began working with people to understand this. But effectively, the main thing she did was normalize it, so I didn't feel weird. It's because then she thought if you feel really weird, you might start it might become more and more extreme. So first of all, just normalize it. It's not unusual to experience it. It's just your brain doing something extra than what it would normally do. And then with this OCD one specifically, you have to, in a nice calm environment, allow the young person to engage with the thing that they're fearful of. It's something simple that I think actually many people have is this 3 drains thing, where you think if you're walking down a sidewalk and there's 3 drains, if you walk over all 3, it's unlucky.
Yeah, I know
or
someone
walking
who does
under
that.
a ladder is unlucky or whatever. And those are light level OCD type tendencies. And the thing you have to do is, as soon as the thought comes in of, this will happen if I do this, you have to immediately engage with the thing that you're not supposed to do. Immediately walk over the 3 drains. And if you're working with your kid, you would do this with them. You'd walk over the 3 drains with them, or whatever their fear might be in their mind, and begin to prove to them that it's not reality. And then you begin to break that kind of conditioned response within their brain. So OCD, I would say normalize it and then calmly work through engaging with the behavior and help them to realize that it's not reality. And also help them see the massive strength in it. I'm so grateful for the OCD that I have within my brain from a kind of meticulous detail point of view. The only reason Neurify looks how it looks is because I'm willing to spend 5 hours working on one slide, because I can get really into
your
something.
slides. Oh my God, man.
Thanks, man.
They really are really good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And so I see value in these things. I don't see it as all negative by any means. And so that would be kind of the route for OCD. If it was ADHD, I'd be going much more down the really realizing it's a superpower. I think ADHD is of so much value to the brain if you can find something that you can get hyper focused on. And often when I talk to parents about this, they very quickly will say to me, my kid doesn't have anything they're interested in. And this is a really interesting thing for society, because a lot of society doesn't have hobbies anymore and doesn't know what they're interested in. And their hobby is have a glass of wine and scroll Instagram reels. Effectively, that's become the modern hobby. And I then started really talking to kids about this, trying to figure out how the hell do we find their hobbies, because the hobby has become the phone. And then I started thinking about it deeper. If, for example, when you were growing up, and not to say you're older than current young kids, but you didn't have an iPhone when you were growing up, if you had an urge within you to engage with some kind of behavior, you suddenly thought cooking was cool for a second, or you thought music was cool, or you thought art was cool, the only way to satisfy that craving within you was to go and engage with the behavior. And I think this challenge we have in society now is all of us have an urge to engage with hobbies and stuff like that, but all we're doing is watching other people that are exceptional at the hobby engage with it instead of doing it, and we're kind of vicariously experiencing
Oh
hobbies.
Man, you're talking about me now.
I'll think cooking meals is really nice at chopping, but instead of actually doing it, I'll watch someone do it. Or it might
That's
be music, it might be art.
I mean, if you count the number of Nothing Else Matter videos that I have on my to keep list.
I know, and you never even go back to them.
Because my guitar's in there and I really have to tune it and I have to start playing. I don't have the time for that, but I can actually look at the video. It's so interesting.
And I think many of us are vicariously experiencing hobbies effectively, and coming back to the brain chemicals, the only way to actually stimulate the dopamine is to play the guitar. It's not to watch someone playing the guitar. It's for your brain to engage with the experience of playing the guitar. So when a parent comes to me and they say, my ADHD child doesn't have any hobbies or no interests, I get them to chat with the kid and get the kid to really observe carefully what videos are standing out to them on their feed. What is the main thing they're enjoying watching? And it will be cooking or music or art or gaming or whatever it might be.
That's such a good...
And your thing is in the thing you like watching most. 100% it's in there. And I grew up, I used to love watching videos of people out in nature, Bear Grylls and stuff. I thought that sort of thing was so cool when I was a kid.
I do too, yeah.
And I just watched it for 20 years and then suddenly realized in my head, literally only recently, about 6 months ago, I can do that. I can go into nature and make videos. That's also an option for me. And now I found so much joy and really immerse myself in nature more regularly and stuff like that. And I think it's really important that we all ask ourselves that question. What is the standout video that's grabbing our attention regularly? What kind of style is it? And then can we personally engage with it ourselves or the parents with their kids?
Hold on. This is my therapy session now. I'm crazy about nature, crazy about the guitar, crazy about carpentry, crazy about cars.
Awesome.
I just recently actually, don't judge me. Don't judge me.
I'm not very judgmental.
I invested in a garage, a workshop,
Cool.
to go back to fixing cars with my own hands.
That's smart for your dopamine levels.
It's incredible. I mean, imagine every Saturday after a very stressful week, I just go report to my team. Like I go like in an overall and say, hey guys, what do you want me to do? And they'll just point me at something and say, unassemble this. And that's it. A Saturday of wonderful engagement with reality.
And that is so the key
Right.
of it, because your thoughts then get a chance to rest. And so much of our brain is spent like worrying and anticipating and future and past and all this sort of stuff. If you really engage in a hobby, you enter that flow state idea of deep focus where no thought occurs. And that's where the brain always used to be. As hunter-gatherers, we'd have always been in no
Exactly.
thought. We'd have been hunting and then building and then like raising a kid and cooking the food. And like now we've got so much time to ruminate in our heads
That's
because we
such a
sit there worrying.
yeah.
Whereas like when you're in that shop on a Saturday, that will be such like good kind of active rest for your brain, where your brain will be like de-stressing itself because it's not computing, oh, what happened with the team and what happened with this and what's next. It will just be, here's a car and I got to try and fix it. And that's so important.
So, but I have all of those. Can I just quit and stop? Like, I love this too. I love slow-mo as well. And I love all of the other stuff that I do. But I'm actually so obsessed, and I'm being very open here. It just hit me at a point in time that, yes, I hopefully will live a long life and will continue to contribute and so on. How many more years can I actually carry a heavy log of wood and put it on my, chainsaw or bandsaw or whatever and just, cut it and turn it into something? Not so many. And it's quite interesting. It's hitting me very strongly now that I need more time doing my carpentry. I need more time playing my guitar. I need more time fixing cars and restoring them. I need more time. And it's just suddenly, I'm almost shifting the other way. I'm like now sort of wishing my whole life was hobbies. Am I going to make it, doctor? Like, and what's wrong with me?
I think...
Nature. Oh my God. I totally
it's
want to
heavy.
buy a place in nature and build my own home there.
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty hunter-gatherer as well if you did that.
100%,
Especially if you build it.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. I think work is great. I think part of the real value in technology is we can start getting much more efficient with like task completion. Like things can be executed much faster than I think a lot of the time we make things take them. And like with that whole flow state idea, the brain can operate very fast if it gets into flow state. So with the working portion of your life, like if you get super disciplined with executing fast and not necessarily, and this is something I'm working on so much, but like believing you have to work 9 to 5, I think is such like a big thing. Like sometimes
What do you work?
9 to 5, 7 days a week. But,
On a good day, 9 to 5.
yeah, that's a short day. But I am genuinely like working on this idea of like sometimes like if the brain wants to engage with a hobby on like a Wednesday at like for an hour, and then it's okay to do that. And so many people would push back, like my work won't allow this and this won't do this and all that stuff. But then like all I would ask is like you go and look at your screen time and the amount of hours you spend on social media throughout the day, and everyone has the time. It's just like where
I call it the Coldplay test. Anyone tells me I don't have the time, I say if Coldplay came to play in town tomorrow, somehow the time pops up, right?
Yeah, so we can impact the time. And like we all spend like 5 hours on our phone a day now. So we could probably...
Oh my God, yeah.
We could get that back. Do you know, I actually recently saw a young person's screen time. I'll come back to that topic of hobby. But it was 19 hours 54 average a day.
No way.
Yeah.
19 hours.
Yeah. And it's about 10 hours of TikTok in the night, which is like, it's so unimaginable what that would do to the dopamine in the brain, and wild.
Can that be fixed?
Yeah, we need like a replacement behavior, something else that's going to like heavily stimulate the dopamine effectively. We can come back to that. But with your hobbies, I think as you like make progress in your career, I think working smart when you're working, but allowing yourself the piece of feeling... I imagine you love productivity. I imagine you love achieving stuff.
I love making things, yeah.
Like it's fun to achieve stuff. And like a huge amount of your dopamine, for example, maybe from that source.
The only thing, I mean, I was asked at a point in time, you know how it is when they fill your head with shit. And, at a point in my life, I thought that my life's purpose was to help startups create technology that's, super technology like Google everywhere in the world. And I used to publicly say that. How I came to that, I have no idea. I really, honestly, I mean, it was just honestly like looking at the world around me and saying there are many things I do well. One of them is to guide startups and help, mentor founders and so on. Then that might be my life's purpose. That was a pile of crap. Like that's absolutely, I don't even engage in business anymore. I mean, it's really not my nature at all. I'm good at it. That's because of the training, right? But it's so interesting when you really dig deep around what you really stand for. And one day I was on stage and someone told me, describe yourself in one word. And I said, maker.
Okay.
All of my behaviors are around making things, whether it's writing a book or, recording this wonderful conversation or whatever. And that one word flipped my life upside down. And I don't know why it popped out. And I may end up, in 5 years' time saying, oh, I was, wrong about that too. But it is so true to who I am.
And what would you say is fulfilling you the most at the moment from that making side of you? What activities? What are providing the most rewarding experience?
It's normally the simplest of all of them, believe it or not. So, I've committed to myself before I got married. I had given myself the final permission around 12 months ago. I said, you know what, you're single. You're never going to meet someone anyway. So, you might as well just literally build the home that you want to live in.
Okay.
And so I ended up deciding to turn my living area into a total nature spot. So all you see, you can see a bit of wall because the plants are not fully grown yet.
Yeah.
But I wanted to build a space where it's fully green.
Cool.
And life. So it was fish tanks embedded within greenery. And I'm really good with my hands, and I really like to take care of plants, and I really know how to take care of aquariums and so on. And I love all of those things. So it took a lot of time to build it. Now all I really need to do is to cut a leaf here, or take care of the fish there, or whatever. Takes me 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes a day.
And that's not much time.
And it's not much time, but it's pure joy.
Yeah, that's a good activity.
It's total
that's
flow.
Meditation, basically.
Yeah, it's total flow. Exactly,
Yeah.
meditation. So you're looking at every root and every leaf and every fish and every, quality of water and so on and so forth. And it's complex. You have to learn those skills. But now to me, it's just such a joy. It's my little, corner of nature within my own living room. And I absolutely love it. But in general, I think hobbies, and you say this so eloquently. I think one of the biggest challenges of our modern world is that we dropped hobbies.
Yeah.
We have nothing other than either being productive or being completely passive. Either make money or raise kids or whatever, or be completely passive. Plug your head into a Netflix series and just do nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because when our brain loves flow state, like it loves that deep state of focus, and effectively when we're scrolling the phone in comparison to, say, the flow state of doing the garden room in your house, I'm going to call it the garden room.
Garden room is a good name. Yeah, I'm going to call it the garden room too.
We're effectively like creating artificial flow state in the brain.
Correct. Yeah.
Where the brain is experiencing like these big dopamine rises. So it's like, wow, we entering flow state? And you'll notice like that idea of not thinking about anything, it does create that. You don't think about anything. You just take in the information. But then we almost have like a rebound effect the other side where our brain goes the opposite of that present experience into a really worrisome state because it's
correct. Yeah.
Seeking to get
back in control.
100%. And I think we all must like find something we can engage in and get better at. Like our brain is so designed to want to get better at things. Like it's so rewarding when you become better at taking care of that room or better at anything in work, whatever it may be. But the challenge with a lot of the work we do in our lives is like it remains very similar. So like you don't necessarily feel like you're advancing significantly in your working life. So you need something outside of your working life to feel like you're making progress on. And that is how dopamine is completely designed. Like as you make progress towards something, dopamine rises and rises and rises, just so that like if you were hunting down an animal, you would get the greatest spike just before you actually got the animal, so that you'd get more and more dopamine, more and more focus. And I think so many of us are just kind of living lives that are always the same. They're not necessarily feeling like they're advancing and like they need to. Like imagine a hunter-gatherer's life. Like I love this. There's this show on Disney Plus called Primal Survivor, and this guy goes and visits all the hunter-gatherer tribes that are still in the world today, like Africa and South America and so on. And it's fascinating for so many reasons. One of them is they're all so happy, which is just so
100%.
interesting.
Yeah, it's
like
crazy,
they're
right?
all like,
Yeah.
like I tell people about this idea and they go, oh, I wouldn't want to live like that. Like that'd be so horrible. And it's like, you actually look at the people doing it and they're much happier than we are, more motivated and connected and less stressed out and all that kind of stuff, even though they're having survived like anacondas and shit. And when you look at them all, they all have such a specific skill set. Like there was even this lady that's like 85 years old in this South American tribe. And it's really important to know these people lived a long time. Like we actually think that life expectancy was like 40 back then. It was by no means 40. Like humans lived for ages back then. It's just we had like higher
Mortality rate.
Rate. Yeah. And she had literally spent her whole life, 85 years, becoming the best at putting poison onto an arrow tip in order to like craft these arrows so that they could successfully hunt with them. And like the joy you saw in her, like building these arrows, and she literally was saying how she'd like got better and better her whole life. Like she's still fine tuning the skill. Beautiful. And it's like we all need to fine tune a skill, and it can be in work, but it also can be outside of work in like artistic pursuits or whatever it might be. But that fine tuning of your garden room or your new mechanic shop, like that is going to be very good for your brain. And I think for you as someone that loves to work but loves hobbies, I think it could be a cool goal to try and have an equal number of hobbies to an equal number of working tasks. Like,
that is a great idea.
If you have podcasts, and I'm not too like familiar with exactly what your business is, like how you're operating it, but the main business, kind of 2 or 3 things that are operating within the business, if you try and match that to your hobbies, like the quantity, that would be a good balance.
That is a great idea. Honestly, thank you for that.
I'm going to text you and see if you do it.
No, but because I was thinking about that. I'm very mathematical about everything. And, you know, the reason why I asked you about the D's is because my young brain truly was just numbers. And you know, and I know it sounds really weird now because now I can understand the rest of the world very much better. But at a younger age, all I could understand was mathematics. You know, to have come from that into a world where I now can have so many hobbies and so many engagements and so on. So when I was looking at my current life saying maybe by 60, 62, whatever, can I reach 50-50, like 50 days, 50% of work and 50% of retreats and silence and hobbies and so on. And it's possible. You know, it doesn't mean I will do less. I'll probably end up doing more.
Well, you'll be so productive when you work if you nail the other side of it. If the other side was you scrolling on your phone and eating crap, then maybe not good for your productivity. But if the other side is healthy behavior, it's going to up your ability.
Exactly. So we focused a lot on dopamine. I want to talk about oxytocin in a world where loneliness is becoming an epidemic. What's happening here? Why are we unable to put the phone down and go hug someone?
Dopamine is a really powerful chemical, so it's kind of overriding our capacity to desire the oxytocin. And again, we're getting a very strong message that we're doing the wrong thing, like a feeling of loneliness and low level of like love in your life. If that emotion isn't really strong, like oxytocin is love effectively. And for context, oxytocin most predominantly released in the moment of birth. So the mum and the baby have this massive surge amongst their brains in that moment of birth, and it pair bonds them. Then you go through breastfeeding and physical touch and cuddles, and then you go into like being an infant and family relationships and friends, and then romantic love, and all of that just drives this human connection within us. And I feel like humans are effectively so addicted to the dopamine that it's overriding our capacity to get hold of the oxytocin. But when we get hold of it, we really feel the importance of it. Like in COVID, for example, eventually, like that first lockdown was kind of like novel, and everyone was like, wow, what's going on? Everyone's super hooked on the news, and like it was actually quite a high dopamine experience of like curiosity within society, I think, in the first one. By the second and third one, it started to get pretty boring and pretty lonely. And that loneliness and that like urge society had to like, oh my god, we can all go out and see each other and we're allowed to hug each other, and that like strong feeling we all had in those lockdowns to go and see our friends and family, that was oxytocin that was pulling us towards each other. And we spent much of lockdown, for example, just engaging in dopamine, alcohol, sugar, phones, and so on. And like it is powerful, oxytocin, and it's really important you start like consciously thinking like, am I stimulating this chemical? Like, do I have enough connection in my life? And even, for example, like if you're married couple and you're sitting on the sofa every evening, either end of the sofa, both on your phones with the TV on, there's no oxytocin at all there. Whereas even if you want to have the TV on, it's fun to watch TV, if you could just sit next to each other and not have your phones, like oxytocin is going to connect through your bodies, and it's important we get conscious of it.
If I were asked to, to prioritize anything, honestly, I know for a fact that one thing that could lead to a lot more happiness is to force ourselves into oxytocin, into a human connection of some form.
Agreed.
And I have to say, it's almost unimaginable for the younger generations that this thing exists. And I think for the older generations, because of the pressures of life and having to go to work and so on and so forth, and the monotonous, rate of life, we're just sort of almost giving up on it. Is there when you talk about gamification, are there practices that you believe we can gamify? A challenge. Let's give people a challenge to
100%.
Yeah,
that's where I definitely love this side of things. So we have these 5 core behaviors in oxytocin, and I can give like a really simple challenge on each of them. Mm-hmm. First behavior is called contribution, and we all have like a warm feeling inside when we support someone else. Like if you do anything kind of someone else, you suddenly get this buzzing feeling within you, and that's oxytocin. It's rewarding you for contributing to the wider group effectively. And that's so imperative to our hunter-gatherer survival that we had this desire to not only focus on ourselves. So the first one would just be, can today, like in the next 10 hours after listening to this podcast, those people that are listening, do some kind of random act of kindness for someone else? Like, can you consciously do something that's nothing to do with benefiting you? And that could be sitting and listening to someone for a while. It could be asking a barista in a coffee shop, how's your day going? It could be helping someone with something, picking someone up, taking someone's dog for a walk. But something that consciously supports someone else is actually going to increase oxytocin in you and them. And that's the goal, is both of us. So that's one. Physical touch is massive, and when we've looked into different bits of research on how valuable can it actually be to physically connect with one another, we've seen that if someone can average 7 hugs a day, there is actually substantial benefits to human health. So you could have a conscious desire today to hug more people. That one really can't be underestimated. Like, teenage girls in schools is a group that I'm really trying to help as much as I can with this D.O.S.E stuff. They really struggle with confidence and friendships and bullying and all that kind of stuff. Self-belief, image. We get them completing this challenge, but in the live interactive session, they all like hug one another. And I suggest to them, right, everyone has this, there's this interactive software, they put in their score of how many hugs they're getting a day. It's always like an average of 1 a day. And then they all have to hug one another. And as I suggest it to them, they all look at me like, oh my God, why has he suggested that? Like, I feel awkward and I don't want to do that. And then they all hug one another reluctantly. Then after like 2 minutes, they're all like buzzing and smiling, jumping around. They all look back at me and I say, like, look how valuable that was. You're all suddenly so happy, even though you thought that wasn't something of value to you. And then we get messages from young girls saying, like, just coming into school and hugging my friends has made me feel more accepted by my friendship group and more confident in myself, and so on. So hugs, whether you're young or older, is powerful.
Why is it in society that we've refused that now? Is it because we're afraid of like what physical touch might lead to? Why are we not? I mean, I'm a serious hugger. Like I hug anything, right? But it's in Western societies, it's a little less accepted somehow, isn't it?
I do see that. I think COVID definitely threw us through a bit of a ring on physical contact. And I think there is like some underlying kind of like awkwardness between society now, because I just don't think humans are in their natural form. I don't think we're operating in our fully natural state. And I think for many reasons, like amongst this conversation, and therefore I think physical touch is one of those things that's become like maybe uncomfortable for some people. And I think it's very important that it's something you just like consciously reintegrate. And like if you're raising a young family right now, for example, like the amount of physical touch you end up desiring as a human is very, very much based on how much you experience as a young baby.
That's correct.
And if you've got young kids, even if you're not someone that loves physical touch, if you can start cuddling them, they're going to become someone that craves it and gives it to more people and shares that like feeling of physical love. And as we like go on this like more robotic human journey, like these are basic things that humans just can't give up on. Like we need it. We need to physically interact like that. Amazing. Elbowing each other when we saw each other in COVID, where we would touch elbows, like it felt wrong. It felt like we need to just hug one another, please. And
it's like, just give it to me. I'm fine. I'm gonna cough. That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll all take it. But
So you were saying five experiences, five, we said physical touch, we said, what was the first
Contribution.
one? Contribution, yes.
Third card is called social life. This is the third challenge. And it's very simply just making sure you engage in some way socially every day. And the main component of that is making sure you consider what's called active listening, so that in a conversation, rather than kind of while someone's talking to you, you are constantly thinking about what you're going to say next. You actually consciously like listen and then respond. And it's a very different form of conversation when people do that with one another. So really active listening. With people that are really into their tech and spending their time on tech, there's also this fascinating study I found when writing the book that had two individuals texting one another on their phones and measured their oxytocin release, and they had 0. And as soon as those two people called one another, oxytocin began to release. So even if you're going to connect via the tech for your social life challenge, it's really important to be on FaceTime or calling, or at a minimum voice notes, because the sound of the voice is actually really important to the release of the hormone. So you got your contribution challenge, physical touch, a social challenge today to engage socially. Fourth one is gratitude, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. It's powerful for the human being. I think one of the most imperative components of gratitude in our world today is that we're living so deeply in states of envy and jealousy and comparison to one another. And if comparison is constantly thinking about what you don't have, gratitude is basically thinking about what you do. And it's a very important counterbalance to engage. Otherwise, you're going to live in like just a constant state of dissatisfaction, which isn't going to feel very nice. So some grateful thoughts. Or we run this often with families in schools, whereby families try and engage in a conversation around the dinner table where each person kind of shares what they're feeling happy about at the moment and grateful for. And it becomes a discussion, which is powerful. And the final challenge is oxytocin doesn't just release when you engage love with one another. It releases when we engage love with ourselves as well. And we all have a relationship with ourselves. That relationship can be very unloving and very tough and critical and not very kind. And it's really important to be able to just say kind things to yourself. And I found this so much. Like when I first started trying to get myself healthy, I tried to get off my phone in the mornings and would go on these quiet walks in the morning in nature without my phone. And I was so bored and I was so critical in my head of myself. It was a horrible experience, to be honest. But I had this feeling of like out here in the quiet, there are like answers that need to be listened to effectively, like messages that need to be listened to. And eventually, after like days and days of doing this, I started thinking like, I can't just be a bastard to myself every day in my head. Like it's too upsetting talking to myself like this. So I started this process of just like, can I at least say one kind of, and we call this card achievements. Can I just celebrate one achievement? And it could be anything. Made my bed, got off my phone, did something nice for someone. And they started this daily process, which I've now done every day for like 3 or 4 years, where it's just like you do your grateful thought, and then you go into like just celebrating one achievement from the previous day. And it begins to build a different style of conversation in your head. Like if you had a parent that was really critical of their kid, that would be like one of those like not necessarily that lovely dynamics between that parent and kid. The kid might not like them and so on. And we are like that with ourselves in our head, like super tough on ourselves and critical. And then you might not really like yourself and you want to build a friendship with yourself. And therefore saying good job for doing this thing to yourself, it begins that conversation of kindness. So contribute to someone, physical touch, a social engagement, a grateful thought, or celebration of an achievement. They would definitely boom the oxy if you do one of those.
I have to say the world is, I'm less concerned about the world when someone like you is in it. That's really, really cool. Can I stay on oxytocin for a minute?
Yeah, for sure.
Minute? When it comes to love and romantic relationships, I find that in today's world there is a tendency to sort of prove oneself right, rather than to maximize oxytocin for everyone.
Okay.
Let me try to explain this, because I find, I'm developing with my wonderful wife, Hannah, what used to be called Finding Love, my book about love and romance. She looked at it and she said, that's wonderful, but you're not taking, psychology into consideration at all. And, a lot of the mechanics that I describe, she says, is triggered from our scripts as children and how we view ourselves. And so part of what we're looking at is that idea of if you maximize oxytocin, a lot of the conversations will be easier. So rather than get into an argument with the objective of proving yourself free, correct, okay, and the other person wrong, can you go into a conversation where you're trying to make them feel good about themselves and feel good about this connection, right? And often you may not even need to get into the argument because you know what, it's not even important. Like, I love you so much, you're wonderful anyway. Mm-hmm. We've lost that in our, not only in romantic relationships, I believe in every relationship, especially relationships online, where all that we're trying to do is to prove ourselves right, not be kind to others. Can you see where that, I mean, where is that a natural tendency, that ego of trying to be right rather than trying to connect?
I think that's an interesting question. I think there's kind of two things at play. One is we as a society are becoming pretty hooked on being right about things because of the divisiveness of social media. So we're beginning to kind of almost get addicted to that experience of being right. And that actually really plays out on social media. Part of the way in which the social media algorithms are designed is they will help you develop a perspective on something, and then they'll send you more videos on it because you get greater dopamine hits if your belief system is affirmed. So then you'll be like, oh, I really believe this. And then you'll see a video that's very much on the other side and you'll think those people are stupid and I'm very right. And that's like why we are very divided as a society, is because we're getting so clearly shown messages that are different from one another. So I think there's an underlying impact of society and technology that's making us seek to be right. And then I think when it comes to oxytocin in a situation like there of actually trying to be right, I think it's so important to understand that from purely an oxytocin perspective, one of the deepest desires we have as a human is basically to feel seen. And as a baby, literally that means as logically as our parent is looking at us and making sure that we're not being eaten by something. And like as
That's
a baby,
important.
Yeah, it's important. It's a very important survival mechanism. And even like if, for example, you measure the oxytocin in a baby's brain, you'll see that if they can hear their primary caregiver's voice, oxytocin releases because of a feeling of safety that person is near them. And I think often in arguments, one of the greatest challenges we can have in a relationship is like not feeling like our perspective is seen. And I think if you're definitely arguing with someone that's trying to prove themselves to be right, you're definitely not going to have your perspective seen. And I think in conversations, like, it's super important to just like slow things down a bit. And if there's a really complicated thing you're trying to solve, I definitely advise like getting yourself into a natural environment to try and solve it, because the body's just going to be much better out there. Or maybe to your garden room. Everyone can go for sessions in the garden room. You can chop around the outside. And
if they can help with the work, that
would probably help them calm their relationship. Yeah. But I think the objective really needs to shift to like, how much can I try and understand this person's point of view? Even if you think you are right, and maybe you are right in this specific negotiation, it's just important like for that individual to feel like, okay, my perspective has been seen, and the likelihood of you coming to a good conclusion of that conversation is much higher. And I think it's really important to just think about that in general. Like when you're engaging with another human, how much are you making that person feel seen? Like I think sometimes I see this like in friends and conversations, like people can be so self-focused now where like it feels that everything is about their experience. And I think social media has done that to us because we all suddenly have these profiles where we constantly see our own name and our own pictures, and like we're so focused on ourselves, whereas prior to the internet you didn't really see yourself, so effectively you were just like focused on whatever was in front of you, and it was likely the other people in the world. We've basically flipped on its head to the main focus in our life is ourselves rather than the group. And I think whenever you're with people, like really making a conscious effort to make sure they're seen, and you ask them great questions about their life and families and work and all that sort of stuff. I think it's very important in a negotiation and an argument, but also in general relationships for maximizing the oxy.
You're a child of the internet.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're using it so well, and you're learning from it so well. If I told you that I have a switch that can make it disappear tomorrow, would you prefer that word?
Oh, that's so interesting. No, my gut feeling is no. I think, and I depends how far. If you could click a switch and go back to hunter-gatherers, I think I'd potentially take that.
Seriously?
Yeah. I think society would be happier and healthier if we were in that state. And I think like the kind of objective as a human is to like have a good experience and like contribute to others. And I think that would be very fulfilled if we were.
This is such a profound point to put into conversation. So all of the progress we've made so far, futile.
Well, it's not that I don't think it's incredible. Like, I think I have so much admiration for every bit of progress we've made in medicine and transport and like every education. I think it's phenomenal what we've done. But I think I find when I watch these shows of humans living in the original way, I think, and I think what we can get caught up on is like when we think back in time, people's brains look back on like 100 or 200 years ago when there were like plagues and like life was carnage back then. So comparatively to then, yeah, this world is extremely good and safe and clean and healthy, definitely compared to like a few hundred years ago. But if you jump really far back, like we didn't really have disease and stuff out in the wild because humans weren't close enough together to form disease and germs, and like everything was very clean and stuff. So I do think that life would have been a very fulfilling, magical experience, very like spiritual experience connected to like death and life. And I do think it would have been pretty cool. I do. The question you asked me, would I turn the internet off? The reason I'm probably suggesting no is I think there is so much wisdom and education to be like shared through that medium.
Yes.
And what I would probably prefer is we didn't necessarily have social media, but we just more had kind of YouTube type platforms.
I was going to say exactly that. I would turn the whole thing off but YouTube.
Yeah, like video education and like I like written education, like if YouTube had that kind of feature as well. I think that kind of thing is fantastic. Podcasts, all that kind of stuff. I think the kind of profiles and seeking for like that kind of validation and stuff, which obviously I'm in that world of seeking for that kind of thing. I think that's quite complicated. So maybe keep the videos and cut the other stuff.
Tell me, I'm not going to tell anyone other than the few tens of thousands listening. Are you also addicted to those living off the grid videos on YouTube?
Yeah, they're cool.
Oh my God, I play those all the time.
I watched a video of a guy building his like cabin in Costa Rica the other day.
Yes, sir.
And it looked so cool. He was fully off grid and he like created some clever like system with water and that kind of stuff. And,
I literally daydream about which tools I'll take with me.
I think it's like because you're a thriving human in this world, and you would have probably just been an exceptionally good hunter-gatherer. Like when I sit across from people, because I spend so much time in this like deep visualization of this world, and because I have these different like OCDs and stuff, like I am so hyper fixated in my brain on this idea. I spend basically 12 hours a day thinking through this lens, and when I'm with people I almost see people in their hunter-gatherer form. Where I can imagine you
like
as
you're a good hunter. You stay in the cave.
You stay back. But like and as hunter-gatherers, like the term would then link it just hunting, but there's so many required skills in order for that group to thrive. And like I can imagine you in that kind of construction of the tribe world, whereby like all of the huts and stuff and I'd be the mechanic. It's like everyone would bring they'd bring back their arrows and their their spears and everything, and I go like not balanced. I'll balance this one for you. 100% not balanced. And the thing is, you would have done that, and like that. I mean, like if you imagine like you were waking up every day and you were doing that with your daytime, and then you also had like a family and a partner you were connecting with, and you were eating only healthy natural food, and you were sleeping, and you would feel so good.
So like be it.
And that is my whole goal is like as we go more and more advanced, like how do we just like really build that instinctive part of ourselves? Like how do we satisfy that urge? And then I think humans can go into this like next phase feeling good and optimistic about like all the innovation that's going to come as a result of it, and the abundance and the opportunity to work in new ways and stuff. But I think this whole body and brain needs to be very happy with how it's being treated, and like getting as close to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle as possible is the way to do that.
I could talk to you forever, honestly. I mean, I think we should just let everyone else go and keep going.
Yeah, we could. I'm happy to do that.
I mean, this is such a honestly, we covered so much ground, and also some of those points are so deep to think about. That idea of balancing the dose. I really love where you're coming from on this. It's accepting the fact that situations and circumstances will trigger a hormonal imbalance within you, and that your need for those hormones in your body will drive you to do behaviors that are not always good for you, and that there is a way for you to actually get those hormones in a healthy way. it's a bit of an addictive approach to it, I have to say, but it's a very healthy addiction. It's almost like being addicted to working out.
The interesting thing with the phrase addiction is my absolute favorite kind of definition comes from Andrew Huberman, and
Yes.
he describes addiction as the progressive narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. And when you are addicted to stuff, whether it's like your phone or social media or porn or alcohol, like very quickly that becomes your primary pleasure source, and everything else feels kind of crap in comparison. And then they describe a good life as the progressive expansion of the things that bring you pleasure. And that would be the opposite of addiction. And although like I framed it in a way whereby people are trying to complete levels and go through these kind of processes and getting dopamine hits, we are really trying to expand all the things that are going to bring someone pleasure in their life. So they're getting pleasure from nature and people and food and sleep and cleaning and like all these like core things humans need to be operating well. And if you can expand what brings you joy instead of it just being your phone and your unhealthy dinner, then you're going to feel way happier.
It's been 3 months in the making. I texted you the very first time when Susie told me about you 3 months ago. Oh my God, it's been worth the wait.
Thank you, man.
This has been such a joyful conversation, so mind-opening. Yeah, I probably will demand that I buy you coffee every now and then and just think what you're doing, what you're going through, and what you're thinking about. You're an amazing, amazing young man.
I'd love that.
I'm so honored that I met you. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Absolutely beautiful.
And everyone, honestly, I keep thanking you for giving me the chance to meet so many incredible humans. And I have to say, TJ just blew my mind today. So many things to think about. And, disappointing in a way that I'm so old and yet I have to discover all of that new stuff. In any case, I am very, very grateful that you're here. I'm very grateful that you're listening. I would definitely urge you to follow TJ. His contribution on social media is always positive, is always a plus for your life. So this is the part of social media that's good for you. Otherwise, let's all hold hands and pray that all of social media disappears other than YouTube, podcasts, and ebooks. I think we would have a much better life that way. Actually, let's have all of podcasts disappear, but this one, I think this one, that would give me a significant advantage. Whatever it is that you're doing today, please look at your activities and find healthy ways to find mental health balance. I can't wait for the book, The D.O.S.E Effect, which is out January. I'll probably give you a reminder about it when it's about to come out. Until then, follow TJ on Instagram and do use that lethal tool that's called social media to tell people about this podcast. What do they say? Like and subscribe and press the little bell thing, just to get notifications so that we annoy you when new episodes of this podcast happen. Find a little bit of time this week to slow down. It doesn't really matter how busy you are. There's always a bit of time to slow down. I love you all for listening, and I will see you next time.